Lewis and Clark hoped to stay near the Mandan and Hidatsa, buffalo hunters who were often visited by traders. The tribes welcomed them as friends, and the Mandan called them Mushi, the pretty people. Together, their 5 villages were home to some 4,000 people, more than lived in St. Louis at the time. Nearby, the expedition settled in for 5 months of bone-chilling cold.
The thermometer stood at 45 degrees below zero. Snowed all day. The ice ran thick, air cold. 3 men frostbit badly.
The captains knew almost nothing about the land of the West. They hired an interpreter, a French fur trader named Charbonneau. He had 2 young Shoshone wives captured by the Hidatsa in a raid. The captains asked him to bring one along to help interpret on the trip. She was about 16 years old and pregnant. The Hidatsa called her Sagagawea. Tribal leaders such as Black Cat told them of a chain of mountains far to the west that could be crossed in half a day, but they would need horses. Sagagawea's tribe, the Shoshone, would have horses and might help. In winter quarters, they called Fort Mandan. The captains prepared a shipment for President Jefferson to be taken back downriver by some of the men in spring. Clark drew a map of the land while Lewis packed what he had collected, including dozens of new plant and animal species. Sagagawea gave birth in February, a difficult labor assisted by Lewis. Tiny Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau became the final member of the expedition.
We were now about to penetrate a country in which the foot of civilized man had never trodden. The good or evil it had in store for us was yet to determine. I could but esteem this moment of my departure among the most happy of my life.
Sagagawea quickly grew more important to the expedition. She showed them edible plants and roots, white apples, wild artichokes, and licorice. When a boat overturned in a strong wind, it was Sagagawea who saved their most important items. Off the river, they faced other challenges. present-day Montana, the expedition came to a fork in the river and a critical decision.
Which of these rivers was the Missouri? To mistake the stream would not only lose us the whole of the season, but would probably so dishearten the party that it might defeat the expedition altogether.
The Hidatsa had told the captains to look for a waterfall as proof that they were still on the Missouri. What Lewis found would test the strength and spirit of his men. The Great Falls of the Missouri were 5 massive cascades. To continue, they would have to carry everything vital to the expedition on a detour more than 17 miles around the falls over rough terrain.
We all believe that we are about to enter on the most perilous and difficult part of our voyage. All appear perfectly to have made up their minds to succeed in the expedition or perish in the attempt.
At every halt, these poor fellows tumble down and are asleep in an instant. Some are limping from the soreness of their feet, others faint and unable to stand, yet all go with cheerfulness.
The grueling portage left the men badly worn down with mountains still to come. But they willingly followed their captains, very different men who seemed to command as one. There is no record the two friends ever argued or disagreed on an important decision. They had lost almost a month at the falls, and they needed to find the Shoshone and obtain horses before the cold weather set in. Sacagawea now recognized places from her youth and could help guide the men, but the Shoshone remained elusive. Finally, Lewis set out with a scouting party to search for them.
If we do not find them, I fear the successful issue of our voyage will be very doubtful.
Clark and the rest of the men labored on through frigid water that was barely passable. They planned to reunite further upriver once Lewis had found the Shoshone. Ahead somewhere was the Missouri's source. From there, the men hoped for a quick mountain crossing and then an easy ride downstream to the Pacific Ocean. Ahead of the boats, Lewis made an historic discovery.
I had accomplished one of those great objects on which my mind has been unalterably fixed for many years.
The source of the great Missouri River had finally been found. From the Continental Divide above, Lewis hoped to see a river heading westward toward the ocean. Instead, he confronted a scene of crushing disappointment.
I discovered immense ranges of high mountains, still to the west of us, with their tops partially covered with snow.
The need for horses was now more important than ever. The very next day, Lewis finally made contact with the Shoshone and persuaded them to accompany him to meet with Clark on the river. Once again, the fate of the entire expedition was in the hands of native people who had never seen strangers like these before. As Sagagowiya began to interpret, the stakes could hardly have been higher. Suddenly she paused.
Manami. Nagobai buninu. Na ishu gates up.
Across the years of separation from her tribe, Sagagowiya recognized Kameowi, the Shoshone chief. He was her brother. As the translation proceeded from Shoshone to Hidatsa to French to English, the two captains must have realized that once again they were extraordinarily lucky. They would have their horses. They spent more than 2 weeks with the Shoshone, a time of reunion for one and rest for them all. But ahead, a mountain barrier whose size no one had anticipated loomed like a monster with 100 heads. The United States lay behind them now. Ahead, lands claimed by Britain, Spain, and Russia.